Well, welcome to Social Assurance Live. This is Social Live. I'm Ben Pankinen, and we are back again in studio, or at least in my office, talking live. This is an exciting one because I'm here with Social Assurance, and we're going to be talking about creativity with none other than Josh Mabus. Welcome, Josh. Josh from the Mabus Agency. Welcome, Josh.
And thanks for having me. Excited to be here. Great afternoon to talk about one of my favorite things.
Yeah, we're going to talk about creativity. We're going to talk about some of the things you've been doing. I've caught up with some of your shenanigans online, but I have to say that, we were talking yesterday about how, normally we would have caught up probably 2 or 3 times at least in this time frame, at conferences and things like that. And yeah, I really miss, hanging out with you in real life.
It's crazy, I mean, I think we did a little prep for this yesterday, and it's like I probably bugged you because I just haven't talked to you live in I don't know 6 months, and it's great to catch up. Miss you, Becky, Jordan. Last but not least, Jordan, because I'll have a tweet pop up in a second.
Yeah, I got to check the comments section. I'm sure she's going to be commenting here really quickly. No, I think it's really fun to just get to know your team and get to know your passion for what you're doing, and miss you and the rest of the team. And I'm sure we'll see Oxford pop in here and some of that gang. But it'd be fun to get the gang back together sometime soon. But for now, this is the best we got.
Yeah, this is the only thing safer than wearing a mask and social distancing. So I hope that nothing bad happens from this interaction.
We don't know. we haven't seen the comments yet. Josh, maybe we can kind of back up for some of the people who don't know you. Throughout the banking community, you've really become a thought leader in this space, and really have brought a lot of different interaction and especially creativity. But how did you get here? How did you get here with doing marketing for banks?
So it's probably not interesting, but maybe to our audience, it's interesting. Started a general services creative firm in North Mississippi in 2008. I was working at that time, or began working with Renaissance Bank shortly, after forming, and they were 2.6 billion in assets then. They're over 13 billion in assets now. So began working in banking pretty early on as an agency. John Oxford there, that if you don't know me, hopefully you know him. Trusted us with some work, some sort of work that he could share with us. It was a strange time in 2008 because a lot of banks and businesses, worked for everybody. We didn't specialize necessarily in banks while we worked with banks when we started. But a lot of companies were in, it was a recession. And by September of 2008, we found an opportunity that was opening up for us where potential clients were firing their sort of big agencies. And where we are located geographically, it's sort of in a triangle between Memphis, Tennessee, Birmingham, Alabama, and Jackson, Mississippi. And a lot of assets, a lot of business here, but no one really serving it except serving our area, except for those larger cities. And each of those were 2.5, 3 hours away. So, we're still in the yellow page, handshake, era. iPhone just launched, that sort of, at that time I was, you can pry my BlackBerry from my cold dead hands. I was inexorably tied to that thing, but started working in banking, and it took several years working in banking to understand that we were doing something that was different from what other banks were doing, that it wasn't just status quo bank work. With John's trust and what we were able to do, with them as they grew, as they acquired other banks, as they went towards Georgia and down into Florida. up to Tennessee. That was already part of the footprint then. John and I both at that point just didn't, we weren't trying to be strange just to be strange, but we could see what the whole world of what everybody was doing. We kept calling it the sea of sameness. And we said, well, how do you stand out in a sea of sameness? You just have to do something a little differently. And we really began to realize at Mabus Agency how different that was, how it stood out, how it aided growth and communication. About 4 years ago now, it began to make the shift to focus solely on banks. For me, I've joked and said, but it's somewhat true. If you're familiar with the movie Days of Thunder, Tom Cruise's character was a Indy racer, open wheel racer, where the cars can win races. You can have a very expensive, well-built car, and the whole plot of that movie is I don't know if I'm a better racer than everyone else. So he goes into NASCAR, which we're not going to mention NASCAR beyond this. And he went into that to see, in this highly regulated industry, to see if he could truly outperform his competitors. Sort of similar, we're in this incredibly regulated industry where we're all under the same or similar restrictions, and we can we can see if we really stand out in the industry. I think the tell of the tape is our clients have absolutely stood out in the industry. And again, we've been able, one of the things I say over and over is zig when everybody else is zagging. We can look at this universe. And I think something unique about us is we work exclusively with banks. I'm not going to get into a philosophical thing there. Our focus is ultra focused. Just because there's contention in those two areas, if you talk to those guys, so it's very focused on banking and their, pros, cons, woes, and concerns, and that hyper focus with what we're able to do. Once we exist in that sphere of focus, now we can really begin to make decisions around how creative can we be.
Yeah. So was there a moment when you were growing up when you realized you were creative? Was there a moment that sort of growing up you started thinking, hey, there's like when was it that you started to realize that there was some level of creativity that you had that maybe other people around you didn't have?
There were a few instances. My mother painted much more than is a painter, was a painter. So I was drawn. I was lucky that she was able to sort of furlough from work and raise me as I was a young kid, and saw her paint. And there was always this desire to create or to draw, paint, do something like that. And I always remember not knowing where to start and going, Mom, what should I draw? What should I paint? Draw a flower. And I would draw a flower. And that leads into one of the problems with creativity. That blank slate, that blinking cursor is one of the most intimidating things. Where do you start? Creating is one of the most intimidating things in the world. It is making something that just a few minutes before you began creating it wasn't there. My dad's a carpenter, contractor. Building houses, helping him, showing up, putting scraps together I never had a set of wooden blocks growing up, but I had a lot of offcuts of 2x4s and things like that, sort of an unlimited supply of those. And, being able to sort of fulfill that desire, to use the components that were around me, absolutely drove a lot of what I did. Really funny. I remember staying up. I was 13 years old. I remember staying up and designing a logo for my first ad agency, and there was a sort of a gap in time where I knew I was going to own an ad agency. I guess a lot of people also thought I was going to be a superhero. So there's no real magic.
Well, clearly,
I've been wrong. I do have Thor's hammer Mjolnir back here just in case something happens. But I've been wrong. People tell those stories. I've been as wrong about as many of my self predictions as I've been right, but I did stay up, and it was, in the back of my mind, to be able to focus on that, to be able to build a job that allowed me to make something.
Yeah, well, so we were texting a couple months ago, kind of in the middle of quarantine, and you sent me a photo of something you were working on, and and I thought, this is something that needs to make its way online. So I want to share, because not everybody necessarily may follow you on social media.
Shame.
But I think, yeah, it is a shame. But I'd like to share with people a little bit of what you produced here, and maybe we'll just share this, and you can then back into how you got here.
Yeah, I say it better than I could say it. So.
Some of us are feeling more confined than others during this time of disquiet and unrest. But here on Star Wars Day, it's a great day to focus on a legendary group whose dedication, hard work, perseverance, patience, and adherence to a confusing set of criteria is to be celebrated. I'm not talking about Jedi Knights, and I'm certainly not talking about midichlorians. I'm talking about bankers and PPP. Thank you for helping small businesses like mine across the country. As we process another round of funding, may the Force be with you.
Well, I love it. Well done video, Josh. But we were texting before this kind of came out, and tell me how you got here. Like, how did you end up sort of tying in Han Solo with PPP lending?
Well, so this is a really weird genesis. And anytime I'm asked about creativity, one thing you'll hear me talk about over and over in this conversation is what I call total immersion, which is not a luxury that we all have, to be totally immersed in creativity or totally immersed in your world or the world around you. Han Solo. So if you guys don't know, that was May 4th, that Star Wars Day. That was almost completely unintentional. And that's where a lot of the stuff that we do that's the most creative, it comes from the most or the least intentional place, other than the fact that we're always intending to create. So that sounds contradictory, but the luxury of having an agency, but even in individual marketing departments, always looking for opportunities. It's kind of a funny genesis for that. So that's Han Solo, played by Harrison Ford, in carbonite behind me in the movie Empire Strikes Back. So part of Star Wars Day. I had the pieces of that sculpture. So Han Solo's face, again, Harrison Ford's face, the hand sticking out of the carbonite, body, pants, and little feet. It's a whole full body thing. I bought this kit from eBay 3 to 5 years ago. And my kids knew I have 3 kids, Chloe, Emily, and Jack. And they said, "Hey, Dad, since we're in quarantine, let's pull out that Han Solo and let's build that." And this was at the very beginning of it, before we should have saved it. It's the short version, because we had to go create some more hobbies because we finished that one too early. And we worked on that in the evenings. And it was, it was a really crappy mold. If I don't know if anybody here makes advanced Hollywood props, probably not, but it was bad. Like where the hands came off, there was this space behind where it would attach to the board. We had to build it up. And I'll tell you, it became sort of depressing for us, because we kept going in, again, have the luxury to have a pretty big workshop. We kept going in and looking at it, and we're just like, it's not coming together. And then one day we put some paint on it, and we looked, it was like, holy cow, this actually looks real. And I looked at my kids and I said, man, this would be really cool to have to tie into Star Wars Day. And the funny thing is, my kids were like, well, I didn't know there was a Star Wars Day. What is this? It's May 4th. May the 4th be with you. Oh, that's cool. It's whatever. And they're like, I can't remember which kid. Like, Dad, it's like end of April or getting towards, May 4th is in like 2 weeks. And so it didn't even dawn on me to tie those two things together. And then it really began to focus. The ingredients were there. I call, this total immersion, you're in the stew. All the ingredients are floating around you. And to serve up an idea, you just have to take those ingredients, taste it a little bit, and see what you need to add or take away. You'll see a lot of our stuff is additive or subtractive of something that exists. And so we had this thing, and I sat down with our staff and just said, let's figure out how to make this work. The first idea that came out of this was one of the best. A guy on my team, Corey Childers, works a ton in bank marketing, probably the most prolific bank advertising designer on the planet, said, what we need to do is always wash your hands, because, hand washing, wash your hands. And then so, his name is Han Solo, not Hans. And if you ever mess up nerd culture, you're kind of screwed. You can't recover from that.
No, you can't.
So we can't make people think we think his name is Hans, because that shows, we know it's Han. In the movie, Princess Leia calls him Han a few times. Lando Calrissian calls him Han. And we actually did this research. By research, we Googled and Screen Rant, or somebody had a count for how many times Harrison Ford's called Han versus Han. We went ahead and did it. There's another video that's right around that one. And we really thought, maybe it would go viral. There would be some virality to it, because it was very, very focused. But what we did, those ingredients that when I'm saying use the stuff around you with this total immersion, we've got this thing that no one has. I don't think anybody really has a life-size Han Solo in carbonite. And we had this situation of Star Wars Day coming up, so high relevance there. And we have a group of clients, in this case happens to be bankers. I don't know that bankers peak out in the Star Wars knowledge of any group. So how can we make that relevant to them and be relevant to the day? And that's how that set up. Luckily, we wrote a sort of a different script about PPP. I think we all went through that stress where we found out on Friday it was voted into law, by the president after close of business for, I think, everybody. And then we had to hit the ground running the next Monday and figure out how to roll this out, even though the Department of Treasury had not made the final rules around it. And, and those rules changed even into the future. As recently as a couple of weeks ago. And so we're just scrambling. So we concentrate on that. Luckily, there was just timing in there to do this. And we, I think by Wednesday of that next week, the funds had sort of dwindled. Some people were turned away. And it was like, can we even play in this area? Right. Is this something that's worth talking about? And then luckily there was another round of funding that was kicking up right after this, which we're still in. And it came together, and we debated as we would with anything. Does anybody, and I would ask the group that's listening, how many people knew what a midichlorian was? If you watched the next, whatever, the second trilogy, and they try to sort of backpedal into Jedi's being made of this explainable thing, if you give enough context around it, I think everybody got generally what we're trying to say, that bankers are heroes. And that during this time where we're concentrating on, and rightfully so, on healthcare workers, on our people keeping us fed by working grocery stores, that a lot of bankers were working longer hours than they had ever worked in their career in a sustained way, being forced into that to help their clients stay afloat. We took PPP as a company, and so we're incredibly thankful to our bank and our bankers, which is Renaissance Bank. And we wanted to be able to give a shout out to that. And so I would say it's really strange because it's not that creative. Once you take all the pieces and you can identify everything you're immersed in, all of those ingredients in the stew, maybe one day that's a seafood cioppino, and maybe one day that's a beef stew. That you take those ingredients and sort of pick them out, add a little bit extra that may not be there, that makes it all fit together, and don't be surprised when you actually come up with something creative. So having your hands and your attention out into a lot of places is by far the most powerful secret ingredient of creativity that I can impart on you guys.
Yeah, well, Josh, you loaded us with a lot of different content in there. In fact, Tim Martinson, our friend up in the Minneapolis Twin Cities area, says he pulls out some Jedi nerd culture context here for you. I think if I'm Tim, I'm a little bit miffed that you discounted that. Bank marketers might not be expert Jedis. I believe Tim is. He's got a real, this is like a deep track right here. Lando, even in the prequel, was calling him Han, like hand.
Hand. Yeah, he called him, yeah.
So, some deep Jedi knowledge right there. Thanks, Tim, for some serious Jedi skills. Josh, when you said, you kind of didn't seem like it felt creative. I think a lot of us sit back and we see something like that happen. And, we sort of go, hey, how does that all come together? And, I just think you walked us through a few nuggets that I wanted to pull out. One of them was that creativity isn't always that surface level activity, right? You started by doing work in an area that maybe, I don't know, maybe had you ever put together a model like that before?
No. I mean, I had the skills. I mean, the back's made out of wood, and I used to sculpt. Where I was going to go in fine art in college was a sculptor, and I looked up and said, I don't think sculptors make a lot of money or really make any money. So then I went into journalism, which was, I went from like, I don't know if the scale's this, I ratcheted up about a tenth of a scale. Journalism's, I don't know, made the basis of what I do. So I'm very appreciative of it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think of, Jim McKelvey, who was one of the co-founders of Square and was an artist. Started glass blowing, and he actually would go back into glass blowing to blow glass for a while to support Square.
Right.
Which is crazy to think about. So maybe you should have done sculpting for a little.
Well, I got it. I mean, I do have I mean, that thing sells for $7,000 if you buy it from buy the officially licensed prop from Sideshow Collectibles. So I've got a $7,000 asset, I guess. So if things get bad, I could at least maybe put that up for collateral, if nothing else, and eat for a few weeks.
There you go. But you sort of grunted your way through building this thing before it came together what the final outcome was. And I think for a lot of us, when we experienced that creativity moment, it wasn't the surface of like, hey, I'm going to take this thing and I'm going to release it on Star Wars Day and all of that. It was layers and layers into building that sculpture before you got to that spot.
Well, I think there's a couple of things in there. One, a willingness to fail. I mean, if nothing else, my family and I would have had a good time building this thing if we would have just, scrapped it at the end of it. I mean, we were as surprised as anybody that this thing looked like a movie ready prop. And I think to some, maybe it would feel like, that cheapens it when you're like, are you doing something with your family that still that's whatever. This is what I talk about total immersion. Everything I do, it is that mindset of, if you, eat all the pieces, the elephant or the buffalo or whatever, that like our Native Americans, First Nations people would, any resource that they harvested, they would want to use all of it. And for me, every experience is trying to inform something else. If I'm watching television, if I'm, anything, I want it to have more value than the face value. Like, okay, I'm watching TV. I don't have the ability. And I think for some people there's a scale. I don't have the ability to just watch TV for entertainment. That's actually a bad thing. My wife will tell you that. I'm critiquing the shots, the scripting. I sometimes just have to, zip it. But I'm watching it for that. In Louisiana, they say lagniappe, a little something extra. If I'm going to dedicate an hour to a television show, I can't take it for just that hour's worth of distraction. That has to inform something else for me, because I'm very aware of this, finite influence I have. So at the back of my mind, again, that's just the type of person I'm under, this incredible pressure. Now, I don't think everybody needs to live in that environment, but somewhere between being totally unobservant of the world or focused, on just taking stuff at face value, versus my level of deep obsession that everything matters, is there's somewhere that's probably comfortable for most people in there. But as Emily Mays reiterated, that being willing to fail. So here's a funny thing. If you follow me on Instagram, we stopped. My family, we got Han done too early in the process, and so we picked up leatherworking, of all things. It's super weird, but my kids really got into leatherworking with us, and I'd never done it, and it's just, maybe it's my upbringing or whatever. But how can all of this stuff inform a greater purpose somewhere that we can bring value to a client, relate to someone, have empathy, but just what harm is it if we screw this thing up? We would not be talking about Han. Hopefully we'd be talking about something today, but Han may not have been the thing that we talk about. It's not a big loss if that thing would have wound up in the trash.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think that's a great perspective. Being able to fail on these items. One of the things that you referenced at the beginning, that you used to go to your mom and say, "Hey, what should I be painting today, or what should I be sculpting?" I've shared with you and others, sometimes when I get asked to talk to high school students, which I fortunately get a lot of opportunity to share with them in classroom settings and things about creativity, one of the things that we always do is we try to figure out how to put additional constraints in order to make creativity happen. I think it's a big kind of contradiction for a lot of us, because we think, oh, well, if I put constraints, then it'll feel less creative. But I think, what I'd really love to learn is how that's really helped you in bank marketing, because a lot of times we feel a whole lot of constraints in bank marketing when those constraints actually help produce creativity. And so I'd love to have you talk a little bit about that, because I think when we take creativity into a spot where we have that constraint, whether it be a compliance constraint or whether it be a website constraint, or having to work on somebody else's core system, all of those seem to be constraints.
Well, I'm not gonna. There's a joke I want to say about core systems being constraints, but we'll just let the audience fill in those blanks. Constraints absolutely help. So if you have this total immersion, this ABC, always be creating, always be looking at those influences, then it becomes overwhelming. Then everything is a possibility, and then we lose focus. So I want to go back to something I said earlier and pointed out. So I had this thing, this physical thing, Han Solo movie prop. I had a date, and I had a date and time, not a date. I had May 4th as a point in time, and I had an audience. Those were three constraints, and they began to build this lane. We talk about staying in our own lane, but that gave definition to what was possible. So that it created the questions that made the piece better. Do bankers know about midichlorians and Star Wars? I don't know. Again, generally speaking, any audience probably, while it's a very popular movie series, probably doesn't know down to the detail. So we know we have to give context clues to draw things together. And that those constraints give us incredible focus. When I started this company, I thought creative firms were foosball tables and bean bags and flexible office hours and things like that. And we operated like that for a little while. And I didn't thrive in it. None of our employees, none of our other people thrived in it. And as we said, look, we're going to work, we're going to get her at 8, and we're going to be diligent about that. But we're also going to be very diligent about leaving at 5. We're not, because a lot of agencies, this waiting for the muse to hit and all of this stuff. We're always in muse finding mode. And we're always trying to, again, I said it earlier, ABC, always be creating. There's something partially done. There's an idea half hatched somewhere, and you can go and pick that up and sort of advance it when the situation pops up. Time frames, being able to put a deadline around a thing, those feel constraining, but they, software development, there's creativity. There's a phrase that we use over and over. It's never finished. It's just launched. And you can come back and advance it, and you can, you can continue to improve it and do version 2.0. But time, those physical constraints, but the biggest one that we found that really does fit everything else, but is strategy. And again, that there was another constraint we put on ourselves. So we've got, so using Han as an example, got this thing, we got a date where it's relevant, we've got an audience we're speaking to, then we have Mabus Agency's marketing strategy. Using all of those, how would we communicate? Not just, and that's why hopefully that comes across instead of pandering as earn it, because we did take PPP. Thank you to all the bankers who worked those extra hours, that sacrifice family time for my business and other businesses to maintain our economy. That's something that we would say. So when that blank page is there, it's not, you're not making it up. That's fake. You're not pulling it out. You're pulling it out of the material that exists. I can't remember who it is off the top of my head, but one, David Ogilvy or Leo Burnett, one of the titans of advertising, said that advertising is the truth well told. It's not a lie. It's not a made up thing. It is finding an incredibly powerful way to tell the truth. For us, we're able to attach the truth of thanks and herodom to something that's to at least a part of the audience is incredibly recognizable and understandable as a hero, and make it a little interesting. And shout out to our video crew that did that. That prop looks great in person. If you walked up to it, you would be impressed by it. I promise you. It is 1,000 times more impressive. I haven't even gone and looked at that prop in person after building it. I watched that video because it looks like it came out of the movie. And you put that production value with it. All of those things mixed together. Maybe you don't have great equipment to shoot that on. Then what are you going to do? And you can begin to make decisions within those constraints. Those constraints are like the lines on the road. They keep you going in the right direction. They keep you out of danger, and it really can open or really focus what you could say into what you should say.
Yeah, I like that. I like that thought of advertising is is the truth well told, and I think that perspective that you're bringing to it brings a really interesting perspective where you're taking creativity and you're combining it with this strategy in a constrained environment. A lot of times in bank marketing, we do feel constrained, and we push against those constraints, and we try to find things. Even as a software company, we've tried to lean into those and say, hey, how do we look at these constraints as actually something that gives us something, right? At times it gives us an opportunity, to track things that maybe we would have struggled to track otherwise, or maybe it builds some opportunities for us, especially because other people are constrained by the same things. So.
And that's one thing I've said unpopularly. I don't know that I would totally deregulate right now. And I would always take less regulation for the expense for our clients. But once we figured out how to compete in this environment, it does it keeps others from being able to jump in and catch up with us very quickly. I mean, competitors, because we figured it out. We figured out how to compete in a constrained environment. And, some of those, again, allow us to focus very overtly, and some of it feels kind of, frustrating when one governmental organization regulates this area that's quasi-contradictory to another organization, and it sort of feels like they don't talk. But once we get into that dance and that flow, and we are great at it, we funded it, and we understand what we're doing, we really can move forward from a stronger position.
Yeah, I like that that thought. So thinking about how you move forward, one of the constraints we run into a lot of times, we're doing a Google Analytics review with some banks today, talking about their websites and how they get created. I know you do a lot of web work, and websites in particular have these really interesting constraints, and that's where my career started as a web developer, and I got into some really lonely places making websites by myself in those early days. But when we started to develop those, we have different constraints today than we did 10 years ago. We have different browser concerns, or different constraints with mobile being such an important focus. But what are how do you embrace those constraints and create something that other people might miss?
Well, again, it's what I said earlier, that when the whole world is a possibility, it becomes difficult to focus. So what this does is it, much like a thoroughbred racehorse, it puts blinders on. So there are options you wouldn't see. So with ADA compliance, it lets us operate under a best practice that serves a lot of good, from serving visually impaired people down to less human, more technical aspects of putting alt tags in that make this better, that make your website better overall, whether that's for search engine optimization. There are plenty of reasons to do things. Obviously, the face value of serving a clientele well, color combinations, again, on ADA, their contrast descriptions. Are there combos we would like to use that maybe don't meet that, because they are pretty limiting at times? There's particular shades of orange and even white that are absolutely visually contrasting, but not enough to pass muster. It can be frustrating, but again, once you accept those challenges and march forward with them, it's another data point that informs the decision, which is, that's what this is all about. So many people think creativity is, again, waiting on that muse or a lightning strike, and if I do the right things and I burn the right incense and the planets are aligned. Sorry, Mercury is in retrograde right now, so I'm having a little bit of trouble. And
we talked about pulling knowledge from random different areas, and so there it is, folks, right there.
Yep. And never play Balderdash with me, because half of you don't know if it's true, and you're going to find out it is. So finding all of those areas and understanding that you're always creating, then don't be surprised when those ideas come. But it's another data point. Another thing I want to say that's sort of off topic, but on topic of creativity, is when I talk about total immersion, it is something like the silly example of Mercury in retrograde. Creativity is difficult. I don't know if anybody's trying to learn a foreign language or play guitar. The rarefied air, and I, with all modesty aside, I do believe that Mabus Agency exists an incredibly rarefied air of being able to create on demand. We almost take it for granted that if we sit down in an hour-long meeting with a client or without, that we have the kernel of an idea in about 20 minutes on average. And there's one core key reason that, beyond total immersion, beyond all that, we are students, and we try to absorb every bit of information that we can. One of the things I talk about over and over is the unassailable position. And that is putting a marketing message in a position that naysayers can't say that's that's in poor taste. Think Kylie Jenner's Pepsi ad in 2015.
Yeah.
Versus a similar message or quasi-similar message with a Colin Kaepernick Nike ad, a couple of years or a little bit later. And again, like it or love it, one's more unassailable than the other. And in a similar subject matter, the more you know, the more you're immersed, the more diverse you are physically, organizationally, in thought, in makeup. Those are the things it takes to truly be creative. It is not some seance kind of thing. Again, it is what we found is it's highly technical, and it is based in constraint, but it's also based in I don't think I'm going to sit down and pick up a guitar and just start playing it because I want to and I think it's really cool. I have to put in the work to be able to do it. So I don't want to be, too whatever soapboxy on that, but if you're wondering why you're not, if you do the things, you've read the books and all that, one of the things I would say beyond the constraints, beyond knowing you're in the soup, the stew with all the ingredients around you at all times, be a student of the world. There's a book, again, I'm sorry, I can't think of names. It's Squeeze This Whipple. I think the guy's name is Luke Sullivan that wrote the book. And he has a whole chapter talking about you have to read Wikipedia. You have to, you ask about creativity as a child. I'm the guy that when I got to go to the library, I grew up in a rural area. I would read the encyclopedia, which is going to really turn a lot of people off as far as hanging out with me. But because of that thirst for knowledge, and that probably helped me more than painting a flower that my mother, with all due respect and love to her, being able to operate with at least some knowledge. You ever sit down to Google and say, I don't even know what to Google to figure this thing out. What is this thing called? Having even that little base of knowledge can help advance the ball.
I love that. I was at a conference with about 100 high school students learning how to do social media, right? And so I thought, well, what's the best thing I can teach a group of high school students? Let's teach them how to trash talk. So it was a really fun experience because, one of them, I said, well, you need to make content for your school. And one of the little groups goes, I said, well, are you playing any sporting events or anything this week? And they go, well, yeah, we're going to play against Centennial. And I said, in what? Basketball. I said, okay. Well, this is easy, right? Like my mind is immediately jumping to a train of thought of how we're going to trash talk this other school. And they said, I said, well, it's Centennial, right? Like I'm thinking that they're going to get this, right? And I go, no, you need to know what Centennial means.
Yeah.
And they said, well, what do you mean? I said, I'm not going to tell you. You got to go Google it. And I said, there's an emoji for it. There's all of this stuff. And so all of a sudden they,
100 reasons. 100 reasons that we're going to beat you. There's
we're going to score 100 points. We're going to, there's, but
hopefully they could back it up though.
Well, yeah, that's part of the danger, right? Yeah, Tim's already trash talking me here a little bit, but when we
only one. Hey, look, it's real easy when there's only one major university in the state, right? Is that the big Husker joke?
I think it's that we haven't won much lately, but yeah, we'll be okay. We'll be okay.
Rebuilding. It's a rebuilding decade. It's fine.
Rebuilding 20 years, whatever. We'll get there. But yeah, even Tim's being able to trash talk me means that he has some knowledge of where we're at, right? Is kind of part of your point is you need this diverse set of knowledge. And so I appreciate that. You mentioned some things about ADA, which I think are also important. About 6 months ago, I had a client reach out and said, we're working on some ADA stuff. And just out of the blue, she let me know that her son is completely blind and lives in our community. And so I had not known any of this fact. So she says, hey, if you're ever doing anything software development wise, you should talk to him. By the way, he's in college right now. And so I take him out to coffee and we sit down and I didn't even know what the right questions were, right? And he said, incredibly gracious and incredibly brilliant young man. And he says, "Let me show you what I see." And he starts showing me how he navigates the internet and particularly social media. And I am like, kind of tearing up, like watching him navigate Facebook.
Mm-hmm.
And he's showing me how alt tags on Facebook work and how to navigate social media. Blown away. But not even knowing the right questions to ask is a humbling process for sure. How do you come up with that creative process to think about, like, what are the questions to even ask when you're sitting down thinking about what's the next, whether it's ADA or developing a website or whatever that is? How do you come up with the questions to ask?
I think it's really starting in journalism training. In high school, I had the benefit of a fantastic mentor, Gary Andrews, as a publisher for a local paper. And the old journalism rules that we hear over and over: who, what, when, why, how, where, I don't know, 5 W's and an H. Those are the basis of all of the questions that we ask, and we ask them incessantly in our improvement process. Really not a big fan of Simon Sinek, because I had start with why so much before he ever even showed up. But we do. But why? Why do we have to do ADA? And a lot of us look at it as this big pain in the butt. But when you meet a seeing impaired individual who you cannot begin to understand what it's like for him or her to navigate the world, your empathy meter, as you said, you began to tear up. And to him, it's probably like, if he, what's the big deal? This is my experience. To him, that's his to him, it's very normal. To us, it's unimaginable how we would do that. One of the thought processes that we've run through, if somebody's kind of having a barrier with ADA, is describe color to someone. It's one of the paradoxes that we cannot explain. Color is totally subjective to us, and I'm not going to go down the philosophical reasoning why and the science behind it and the psychological science, but color is totally subjective. I'll say this: it's totally possible when I look at the border around this video that what we would all agree is purple, but how we're processing it, your version of purple may be what I see as orange. It's completely subjective. But finding those opportunities, if you wouldn't have had that conversation, you wouldn't have gone down that path, you would have been introduced to that young man, and it would not have opened up your experience. So being willing to learn is the first one, but who is this for? Why do they need it? What will they do with it, or how will they use it? What is important to that person? That 5 W's and an H. How will they utilize it? How will they feel when they use it? Is an incredible set of questions, and be a nerd about it. Over ask those questions. That is our job, because we're all UI UX people. We're all user interface, user experience people. We tend to think that in advertising, the only interactive advertising we're doing is in an environment like this on our laptops or phone. Handing someone a business card, as antiquated as it may be, is one of the most interactive things that we can do in business. So that thing has to be completely interactive and engaging as a website. A billboard, 4 seconds at 400 feet is the standard sort of metric. That has to be incredibly engaging, because I'm more distracted while driving than I am when I'm watching a movie and my phone beeps and there's a message on social media. I'm not going to wreck. Maybe my marriage, if I'm not paying attention with the what's going on and that, but it's concentrating on how that interactive relationship plays out by beating it up with, again, a simple base of questions: who, what, when, where, why, how, is and different permutations, iterations of those questions. If you're not asking those questions, you're probably going to get beaten by a competitor at least in creativity.
Yeah. Well, I think you're absolutely right. Ready, the humility to ask those questions and that desire to learn are really critical. Now, I also want to gather from you. You're gathering from a lot of different places, and part of what that makes you interesting, right? Like it's part of why I like hanging out with you, Josh, is that you've got this background of a lot of different interests and ideas that come into that creativity. But I think that also has a forward-looking aspect as well. And how does that help you? What do you feel like is the next thing happening in banking? What do you feel like is the next thing, whether it be, in web, in advertising? What do you feel like is coming next?
Man, I wish I could just fade to black. I'll tell you what, I'm going to do a seminar for $10,000 and I'll, everybody jump over to that and I'll tell them what's coming next. I think it's actually a return to old school, a return to the basics. I think relationship banking is going to be bigger than we ever thought in the business sector, while digital is going to be more important than ever in the retail, consumer, individual DDA sector. We saw that. Those of us that had bad web experiences, bad core experiences, bad app experiences got beaten. Those of us that had great experiences probably won against our competition. Plenty of banks, we've heard the stories of how they gained a client through PPP because maybe a larger, more sophisticated competitor could not serve them and their business well because of their monstrosity of size or their huge purview in the marketplace. So I really see a couple of things. And in that retail sector, when I talk about concentration on digital, I mean a really deep one. We've given this a lot of lip service as banks, and I'm not here to create some sort of revolution. But look, I've seen the balance sheets of the publicly traded banks, small and large. No one got through this, I don't think, necessarily better off. Took hits in profitability. Our businesses did not do well. And so we need to look at our expense line item as it comes to our digital vendors and challenge them. And I mean really like cores and things like that we've sort of just taken and say, it's got to get better. Companies, I know you didn't ask me to do this, probably wouldn't want me to do it, but like Social Assurance, where it just works and it works excellently, we have to gravitate towards those and get away from the things that maybe we've taken with a grain of salt and look at that with a fiduciary responsibility and a responsibility to our clients and deliver this fantastic digital experience. Because look, not a conspiracy theorist, but we've been through SARS, pig flu, bird flu, everything that came before COVID-19. I don't think it's a doomsayer to say there's going to be something else in the future. So what can we do to engage when we're separated from our clients? On the other side, I do see a return to personal banking and a focus on personal banking. Those people, as I alluded earlier, that beat the larger banks, the more sophisticated banks, beat them by caring for the client one-to-one, holding hands, giving confidence and comfortability in the process. Because, look, as tough as PPP was physically, it was mentally exhausting because, again, that Monday after it was passed, I don't know the dates off the top of my head, when that rolled around, we were expected to give answers at 8 a.m., 9 a.m. that Monday because the business owner had 2 or 3 days to process it, and they expect their banker. We expect our bankers to know. I don't know that we could have performed any better. I'm sure several banks. We always could, but we won it on a personal touch, which is what we always say, our people and our relationships. One of the things I want to really quickly talk about is differentiation within that. Not only are we similar in how we're regulated, we're similar in our products. Your bank is probably lending at a similar rate above prime than a large or a different institution, larger and smaller, and your people are the difference. What we have to find is that nuanced difference beyond those things. I guess what I'm trying to say is when I'm putting those on the table, those are constraints. Those aren't your strategy. Your people and your relationships cannot be your strategy because those same benefits are shared by others. What do they do differently? How do they do it differently? Why can we outperform? Answering those questions, but digital, less personal, around retail, the quite frankly less profitable yet absolutely necessary area that we ignored for a decade in deposit gathering that put us in constraints and a rate crush. We have to make that easy to capture those deposits. And I think especially the community banks are listening, we're going to really be able to lean into that personal relationship and become a little bit old school. People will appreciate. Imagine again the Friday that the president signed that in at 5:30 Eastern time or whatever it was. Again, late in the evening. The difference in performance if someone had a personal banker. I texted my banker and said, "I want to be first in line on Monday." I texted him and said that because I have one. You have that opportunity at your bank to lean back into a little bit old school. But those aren't mutually exclusive. Back those people with incredible technology, and I think you're going to win.
Yeah, well, I think that's a great thought, and it really shows some of the strategy combined with an understanding of all of those constraints. And our friend Natalie shared a question that you were starting to answer, but I think there's a little bit more to it. And she says, moving forward through this post COVID-19, what new approach will you take with your business, or even how you develop new clients? What really has been your aha moment thinking through all of this?
It's a great question, and I'll answer it as probably more personally than I would intend to. One of the things for me, this has been tough on me as a small business owner. Looking at our people, we had people, employees who were worried that they were exposed, worried about their parents. As a 31-person business, this was highly personal. We had to look at a lot of very tough decisions during this process. Now we're healthy and great, but I'll tell you the big thing that came into focus to us is my empire building desire really shrunk. And this is a great question from Natalie, because I can announce it here. If you want to work with Mabus Agency, you better hurry up and call us, because actually our big aha moment is limiting our number of clients. We're over the next probably 12 to 18 months, we're going to focus on those that trust us, that we went through hell together, and we built deeper relationships. That highly valued us during this, and we're not going to add a whole lot of new clients. I don't have to go add 30, 40 new clients. We really want to add 2 to 4 new clients. I very much love being closely involved with each of our clients, helping them set strategy. I didn't set this up. I didn't sit down and practice being a CEO at 13. I didn't design a logo to be a CEO of an agency. I like being a creative. And I like being a strategist, and I like being a helper. That's really what this is being able. Our mission statement is probably one of the simplest in business. We exist for 2 reasons: to help people and to raise the creative bar. And while from whatever 13, 14 years ago, if we weren't profitable every week, because we weren't, especially in the beginning. And then we had some kind of terrible 2s or terrible 3s or 4s in there. But being able to look back and keep that mission, the main thing, did we help people and did we raise the creative bar? I will tell you, for however many weeks we've been in business, at the end of every week, we've been able to answer that. But it's really to focus. And I would say this could be true for your banks as well. Realize what you did really well. We went out and we really tried to diversify and capture a lot of stuff. There's a case study that's pretty strange, I'll give you. Look at Hardee's when it switched its business. I think in the early 2000s, they were selling. They've gotten back to this. They were selling fried chicken. They tried to do all this different stuff. Carl's Jr. It's what Hardee's or Carl's Jr. They're the same set of restaurants, and they shrunk their menu and focused on being a great burger place. There's a letter from the president out there of the company, not the United States. Well, he is a fast food aficionado, from what I understand. That the president of Hardee's, Carl's Jr., wrote to to talk about that focus. So, I mean, what we took out of it is focus and keep our precious things close. Being able to spend, even with Han Solo. I mean, the theme of this is family. Being able to concentrate on those things, is really what we took away from this.
I appreciate that. I think it's a great thought to leave us with, Josh. And I think you're just seeing the way your company's growing in its fulfilling of that vision. You may not be setting out to land lots and lots of new clients, but the vision is sound, and you're really coming into that, and it's fun to see that creativity really center there. So, Josh, I can't thank you enough for being on the live stream with us. I also can't wait to see you in person sometime soon. But thanks for being with us today.
Everybody be ready for that. It's the next event that we show up to is just we may not even attend any of the sessions. It's just going to be just a hug fest and a catch up. If we can hug by then, maybe we can all feel safe in that. But no, I'm excited. All the group that participated, and gave their comments, very thankful for them. And definitely, Natalie threw in that she misses us. We there's a great crew, but the thing is, there's no cliques. Everybody here is welcome to hang out with us as we. I don't know. We can't shut it off. We're talking about banking. We're talking about fun stuff, which banking can be fun. And, it's a really great balance. So really, really thankful for this group and the group of listeners. Excited to see everybody.
Yeah. Well, thanks, Josh. And we'll catch up soon.
Absolutely. Thank you, guys. Have a great evening.